All right. Hey, good morning, Recovery family. I'm Kara Izzo, and I'm an outreach and engagement specialist with Recovery. And I have with me today Donna Burke, coming to you live. Donna is a professor at MCC, and she does all sorts of meditations for both MCC and for women in recovery. So I want to introduce her and thank her for coming here today.
Well,
Hi, Donna.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So I met Donna, I'm going to say it was about 10 years ago at a women's meeting. And she always had kind of like this cool vibe to her and a very, I'm going to say a peaceful aura. And so, at the time I had just met you, I hadn't known you before. And I think I know where that peaceful aura comes from, but maybe you can share a little bit about, I know for you, meditation's a huge part of your recovery. So I'd love to just hear about that and your experience with meditation.
Well, thank you. And it's funny that you would describe me as having a peaceful aura, because I don't know that would be anybody's description of me before I started meditating on a regular basis. And even now today, we were just talking before we went live about, having these moments, we all have moments. And so, just a little bit about my recovery journey. I have struggled with alcoholism almost all of my life. I started drinking at a very young age, and nearly died at age 14 of alcohol poisoning. And so it's been a long journey for me, and trying different things, and nothing seemed to work. And I had a period of sobriety between age 25 and 37. And I wasn't using any kind of formal program. I just was hanging on by the, skin of my chinny chin chin, and trying all sorts of things. And I would try all sorts of, it was so ironic because, I was trying all sorts of things and nothing was working. And eventually I relapsed. It was sort of an inevitable relapse for me because, my program was really, like I said, I was hanging on. And when I relapsed, I suddenly had this urge to get healthy, but I'm using, and I'm using tobacco products, and I'm using alcohol, and my life is just sort of spinning out of control. So that's the time that I want to do things like run a marathon and do triathlons. I could barely breathe. Because of what I'm ingesting into my system, but I'm going to do these things, So I was really sort of a very out of control person when I relapsed for 3 years. And then finally I just hit a really hard bottom, I was physically sick. My personal life was starting to kind of fall apart. And so I did outpatient rehab, and some of the things that were being recommended, I was in shock. I was just sort of stunned, and that this would happen to me again, and I'd be battling this again. And, and I was encouraged to work a 12-step program, although I did not want to. I was like, I don't need that. I tried that one day back when I was 24 years old. I don't need that. And, through that program, meditation and prayer was recommended. And again, I kind of balked. I was kind of like, I'm not a religious person. And what does this all have to do with anything? And like we talked about, when I first tried to sit down and meditate the way I thought you were supposed to meditate, it was hard. And I actually had the reverse feeling of what I was trying to cultivate. My anxiety went through the roof, and I was like, how is this helpful to anybody? And luckily I had in my path some really wise people who said, you know what, you got to kind of give yourself a little break, just sit for a few minutes, take a few breaths. I don't know if you're like this, but I'm kind of this all or nothing person, so, if I'm going to meditate, I'm going to turn into some kind of meditation guru. I'm going to go to the Himalayas and sit and shave my head. And, I'm going to be all in, and I'm going to expect this Nirvana-like experience. And, you know, the thing I think I'm most proud of in my sobriety is that I didn't give it up. You know, I took these people's suggestion to just sort of like, don't make a thing out of it. You know, someone gave me great advice to treat it like brushing your teeth every morning. Do a little bit of it. And that was beautiful advice, you know, and if you're feeling anxious, get up, don't do it right then. And so, so it's just been this like really slow and steady journey. You know, another great phrase that someone said to me is try to practice gentle diligence.
Mm-hmm.
And again, for me, I always joke, there's nothing gentle about my diligence. It's always this hard driving thing. So the fact that you would describe me as peaceful, that's good.
I know. And again, I did pause a moment before I said it again, but yes, I would describe you as peaceful. And it's funny when you were talking about the all or nothing approach, because you do hear a lot about meditation, you know, in recovery. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I set a timer for myself, you know, because what I was doing is I would meditate, but I'd be going like this, like looking at the time to see where I was going to. So I got like a little twirl up timer that when it finished, it was like, and it's like, well, that's not helpful, you know. And I had to like Google how to meditate and try to read books on how to meditate. Like I made it very big. And so when you say, you know, treat it like brushing your teeth, well, I can do that. And I will ask you to respond to that in a moment because my dog doesn't meditate and he wants to come in.
All right, sure. I'll wait till she comes back so I can respond to that. But we were joking. I do a meditation session at MCC, and one day we're meditating, and the Amazon man rang the doorbell. My dog barked. The neighbor started mowing the lawn, and my partner made some loud noises, and it was just sort of like chaos during the meditation session. So Karen knows that, you know, one of my suggestions is also to just sort of accept whatever's happening at the moment and just kind of let go of it. And so that's what we do.
Yeah. Well, and it's, you know, people will point out that it's a practice, you know, and a practice means something that you have to practice. And so, you know, there are times that it feels more effective than others, but there's no way, from what I understand now, like there's no way to do it right or wrong.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point about it being practice. And practice is usually, I won't say always, but practice is usually practice for something. Mm-hmm. And so that's the other thing that was helpful for me to understand is that I'm practicing for my interactions in the world, my life outside of formal practice of sitting on a cushion, or I'm practicing for when I'm having those challenging interactions with someone. And I need to kind of be aware of what's coming up in my body and realize, oh, I'm starting to experience anger or frustration, and not to push those kind of feelings down or overreact to them, but just sort of acknowledge them and breathe into them so that if I need to respond in that moment, I can do so much more skillfully than just like sort of flying off the handle or being really reactionary. So I look at it, yes, it's a practice, and it's a practice for everyday life. Because I think the other thing I did sometimes is make a real distinction between meditation practice and my real life practice, you know, just navigating the world. And so what's been helpful is this sort of cultivation of what I call a meditative awareness. Mm-hmm. And it's not perfect and it's not all the time, but it comes up when I need it. You know, when I have some difficult interactions or I'm feeling really anxious, sort of coming back to the breath is such a beautiful practice.
Well, and I do notice every time I'm aware throughout the day, if I think of my body and my shoulders and my jaw, like it will always be tight. And so if I consciously think about it, I let my shoulders down. I loosen my jaw. And those are all things that I learned in meditation. I'm not even aware of the fact that it's happening until I think about it.
Well, and we often talk about, especially in the practices that we do, we talk about, and I hate to say it like this, like it's 3 stages, because, I want to, I want to reach all the stages and I want to reach the stages perfectly. So try to let go of some of that. But like when we start meditating, it's really helpful for me to come into my physical body, like be aware of my physical body. Like you said, what am I feeling? Because sometimes we're going through the day and we're not even aware that we're holding our bodies in tension, and it can build up, it can accumulate. And so first coming into feeling our physical body and letting our bodies settle, that's another important thing. 'Cause sometimes I would sit down and I'd expect something to happen instantaneously. And when I felt that rise in anxiety, it was like, oh, wow. But, think about a whirling dervish or, a centrifuge. If it's spinning, it takes some time to settle. If you spin a beaker full of dirt, and it's not going to all settle right away. It takes time to kind of have that coming down. And I think of that as myself kind of like coming down for a second. And I need that time, that transition time. So sitting down to meditate, connecting with our physical body, doing what you kind of described, it's like a body scan, is, a lot of my practice is informed by a meditation teacher and researcher named Jon Kabat-Zinn. And he wrote a book called Wherever You Go, There You Are, and Full Catastrophe Living, which Full Catastrophe Living, I totally related to the title right away. Like, my life's a catastrophe. I need to read this book. But the Full Catastrophe.
Can you tell me his name again, Donna? I want to put that out.
Jon Kabat-Zinn. So JONKABAT-ZINN. And I could send you some links and some resources. But Jon Kabat-Zinn started a very famous, it's like over 30 or 40 years ago, started a program called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction through the University of Massachusetts. And he did that to see if these kinds of practices would reduce cardiac events in people who've experienced a heart attack or stroke. Would it reduce that? And it did. And now it's like used in many, many different forms. And he really uses the work of a body scan. So scanning your body from the top of your head down to your toes, and just noticing what you find there, so because sometimes I think we are either fighting against what we're feeling in our body or denying what we're feeling, or we're not even aware of what we're feeling in our body. So the first stage is kind of coming into your body and just letting yourself settle for a second. And then what's a helpful practice for me is that second stage is once I allow myself to kind of arrive and settle in, just being aware of a point of focus, like the breath. I mean, the breath is just this beautiful thing we have in our body that helps us center. It almost immediately has an impact on our stress levels, our hormone levels. The hormone cortisol gets released from the body when you're in a heightened state. The breath just really helps to lower the response of our sympathetic nervous system. So it almost immediately can start working to kind of calm us down. And then once we kind of get in a more sort of calm and eased state, we could just sort of rest in this sort of open awareness, like thoughts come, thoughts go. We don't have to kind of get attached to them. When we notice that we just kind of like remind ourselves, oh, I'm off in someplace else, or I'm feeling really anxious. Let me just come back. And again, I think that keeping coming back to that point of center is what we can use out in the world.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. And it's a muscle we have to practice with, because if we don't practice, we're these whirling dervishes, and I need to keep practicing coming back so that I'm not, I don't lose myself.
Well, and people talk about that, that rest for the mind, like when we exercise, people, all right, I'm the first to admit I'm not the big weightlifter, but people that will say, today's arm day or today's leg day. And then the next day they rest that body part because your body needs to recover. And our brains, unless we meditate, are never at rest. Even from what I understand in sleep, it's not the same type of rest that you get from going into a meditative state. And so we really allow ourselves to just rest the mind for a minute and, come back to that, and that we need to do that in order to have a healthy brain.
Yeah. And I think what happens is when you try to do that, and then you feel that some people feel that initial rush of anxiety, or those feelings that I don't want to feel these feelings. You're like, well, that's not working, and it's really easy, I think, to dismiss that. We were talking, the point that we were talking about is, brushing your teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things to do is to also bring mindfulness or a meditative awareness into everyday activities like brushing your teeth. Just noticing when you're cooking your dinner, chopping your vegetables, hearing the sounds. So mindfulness and meditation kind of can go hand in hand, and you can infuse it into our daily activities, so that it doesn't just become about sitting on a cushion. It could be walking meditation. It could be stopping and just taking a few breaths. Because I think sometimes sitting can be really hard for some folks, and they say, well, I can't sit. Well, so then I can't do meditation. And that's definitely not the case, And
so the first time I ever did a walking meditation, like you just referred to, was at a Women in Recovery meeting that you started. And it was at Colgate Divinity at the time. And when the person who was leading us that day, well, I don't think it was you.
I think it was my good friend, Mary.
Your good friend Mary had us get up and walk around Colgate Divinity. And it brought my memories back of the, winking to see what time it was, because I was looking to make sure I didn't walk into the person in front of me. And, I was just what I'm going to say is I was very aware. I was very aware of myself and my surroundings. And I'd never done that before. And so it was kind of interesting to think, okay, I don't have to sit like this and meditate. It can just be walking. I was at a convention once where the presenter said, okay, we're going to just take a few minutes to meditate. And all of us, went like this. And she goes, you all just got ready. Every person in this room just got ready to meditate. That is not necessary. We just do it. And it was funny, but it's so true. Every one of us changed our posture.
Yeah. And I think that's why we started that little group. So the Women in Recovery meditation group, we started it it's going to be like probably 4 years now, 3 or 4 years. I have to go back and look. But it was started by myself and 2 other women in a 12-step program, because we would constantly hear women say, I can't meditate. I can't meditate. And we had been involved in meditation groups in the community, but often those are related to a spiritual tradition or a faith tradition. And so people sometimes either don't know about them or feel intimidated, or don't feel like, I don't want to get involved in all that, And so we wanted to create sort of this spiritually neutral space where we're not necessarily promoting any particular spiritual program, but we're mainly supporting women in the practice of meditation. And because meditating in a group, that's the other thing. We often think of meditation as a solitary practice, which it is. I mean, we're in here. We're the only one who's in here. But being in a group, I think, can be so helpful and so supportive. And I was so surprised by that, because you're right. I'm kind of looking out my eye going, okay, that person's a little fidgety. And so it makes me feel okay that I'm fidgety. Well, if they could be fidgety, I could be a little fidgety, or, so it's just a beautiful thing. And then when we finish talking about what our experience was, and sometimes our experience is very pleasant and restful. And other times people are like, whoa, I couldn't settle myself down. And somebody will say, like, me either, and it's just, I don't know, there's something beautiful about meditating in a community.
Yeah. There's definitely a different feeling for it, because I do try, sometimes it's more consistent than others. I do try to have a daily meditation practice, and it's not usually actually by myself. I said my dog didn't meditate, but sometimes he does, because he'll come and sit with me.
My cat's like a Zen master, he's just like,
I know. I love it. But it is a different feel when you meditate in a group, and it's, as a matter of fact, when the pandemic started that women in meditation group, I think right away you transitioned it to a Zoom meeting. So now meditating as a group from our bedroom and a computer, and it works.
Well, and I think, like we talked about before we went live, I think we're going to try to keep that Zoom presence, even if we end up going back to in person, because it makes it so much more accessible to a lot of people. So I'm really hoping that one of the benefits of everything that we've been through is that using technology to make things more accessible to people. And because it's, so much, like you said, you could just sort of tune in, even if you don't feel like driving across town, and you could relax in your own space. Sometimes that feels really nourishing to people, to be in their own space too, but still be a part of the community and a part of the experience. So,
well, and what do you think about that? We've talked around it a little bit, but what do you hear most often as the challenges or the obstacles in someone's way to actually get into a meditation practice?
It's all here. It's our mind,
We're trying to fix this with this.
This. It's all between here and the problem. But it is. I mean, I think it's that, image of what we think meditation should be. And then I need to be perfect. And then it needs to look a certain way. And I was talking to a woman in recovery one time, and she's like, I want to get a daily practice, but I can't sit, and I don't want to do this. And I said, well, do you use a daily reader? So many folks in recovery use those little books. They're like daily readers. They may have a passage related to recovery. Hazelton has them out. AA publishes them. And they don't even have to be recovery related. They could be spiritually related, whatever. And she did use those. And I said, okay, great. So wake up in the morning, sit down, try to let yourself settle a little bit, and take 3 conscious breaths. Just be aware that you're breathing in and breathing out, and then open up your reader, read your daily reading, close it, let yourself sit, and again, breathe maybe 3 to 5 times. There's your daily meditation practice.
And that might take you 3 minutes.
Yeah, it could be as simple as that, as adding some breaths to a habit you already have. Can be a beautiful practice. The other thing is, one, you talked about a timer. There's an app called Insight Timer, and it could be just a timer in and of itself with beautiful bells at the end, so that you don't have to be looking at the clock, although I still look at the clock. But there's also many, many guided meditations on there that are free and have different lengths of time and different focuses. So Insight Timer is another really good app. So I think for me, it is it's more of a mental block that people have. Sure, people have physical limitations, but you could sit in a chair and meditate. Like we talked about, you could walk. You do not have to be on a cushion in a lotus position to get the benefits out of meditation. So I think sometimes it's our own sort of, mental blocks to what's, what we're supposed to be doing, and just resting, like you talked about, just resting the mind can be a beautiful thing, because we have trained our mind to be reactionary over years. And because we are addicts, I think I don't want to feel what I'm feeling. So I want to change this, and I want to change it right now. And so having something that could take a little bit longer to cultivate, I think people sometimes get frustrated with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it sounds like 2 of the biggest things that you mention as challenges or obstacles are time, like how much time we have to do this, and then our self-doubt. Can we do it right? And so you really discounted both of those by saying it can take a minute, and you can do it however the heck you want to do it.
What's interesting is some of the line I get the most feedback on when I'm doing a guided meditation. Sometimes I'll say, give yourself permission to just let go. Give yourself permission just to rest for this moment. And afterwards, people are like, oh my God, when you said that, I could feel everything sort of drain from me. And like, how sad is it that we don't give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves and to allow ourselves to rest? And so to me, that's another thing to kind of remember, is that we have permission to, we give ourselves permission to do a lot of other things. but to rest and to take care of ourselves and to let go of the grip we sometimes have on life.
Yeah.
That's been a huge benefit to me, I think.
Well, I think a lot of people tend to be givers. And I think that whenever, I'm talking with somebody about recovery, that whole you can't pour from an empty cup comes up to my mind all the time, because we feel like we need to help others. But if you're not helping yourself and taking that minute to care for yourself, there's really nothing to give.
Absolutely.
And having that meditation practice, even if, people that are listening right now, if you commit to yourself, just do it today. Do it for, 3 minutes today and see how it makes you feel. And then, tomorrow, try again.
Yeah. And find a place that feels really good. Be out on your deck in a chair. We've had some spectacular days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just absolutely beautiful days, to just take a moment to sit for a moment, and just keep coming back to your breath. I mean, that could just be a beautiful practice, and just to be really light with yourself, and not harsh. Because that's the other thing. I think the mind starts going like, oh, you're not doing this right. See, you can't do it. And the mind just kind of takes off. And we often talk about, treating ourselves as we would, a small child or a dear friend, like, come on, you can do this. It's okay. And we're just so not used to doing that. And so just really being light with yourself. Yeah. But there is that sort of diligence you need too, of saying, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to commit to doing this, but in a way that's supportive of ourselves and not harsh.
Well, and to me, the best way that I have found for myself to commit to this is to have a certain time of day every day that I do it. But then the not being harsh with myself part is, if for some reason I can't do it at that time, I'll do it later.
Yeah. Or just say, you know what, I couldn't do it today. I'm gonna try to do it again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because, I've done that with group, I might be committed to doing meditation in a group and I can't do it that day. And I'm just so hard with myself. And it's like, well, I couldn't do it today, and not making it that all or nothing kind of thing. Well, I'm done.
And I think you sort of started this with that, a lot of us tend to have that all or nothing attitude, and meditation's a good way to practice, being a little bit easier on ourselves.
Yeah.
And for me, having support of others is a great way for me to get through all sorts of things, whether through my own recovery or through learning about other people's practices like meditation. And, Recovery Fitness, that's what we do. It's other people that are there for you, whether for peer services, if you have somebody that you just want to reach out and talk to someone, or if you want to get a meditation practice or a physical fitness practice, anything, there's other people that have those same feelings. I popped up the phone number here if anyone needs peer services. And Don and I were chatting a little bit before the live broadcast that Rockcovery's opening a little bit again now. You can go there for some community between the hours of 11 and 3. Go out, see Yana, see Kirsten. People are on site to talk. We're all ready for some human interaction. Meditation is great individually or in a group, but sometimes we also need that face-to-face.
Absolutely. And I'd be more than willing, if anybody contacts you, you can contact me, and I'd be more than willing to talk with people one-on-one about it, strategize ways to start a practice or continue a practice or rejuvenate your practice. And we have our Monday night sessions that I can send you the link you could share. We're going to be doing those through the end of June, and then talk about replenishing yourself. We're going to take July and August sort of off from formal practice. I'm going to be doing some traveling, and then we'll start up again in September. And maybe we'll kind of expand some of those offerings too, especially now that we have Zoom. So
yeah, that would be amazing. And I think during this time over the last few months, a lot of people have benefited from meditation, or have benefited from learning more about themselves during this time. So lots of resources out there. And Donna, thank you so much for being my meditation guru. Because even though you say you're not always good at it, you always appear to be.
Well, it's just been so beneficial to me. So I love talking about it, and I love sharing the practice and making it more accessible to people so that you can benefit from it. So
Well, thank you very much. And yes, if anybody wants to hear about the Women in Recovery meeting, we have information to share on that. And Donna, I wish you a good couple months off rejuvenating, and I'm sure you'll be doing a lot of meditation.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Donna.
Take care.
All right. Bye.